All right, well, we're here for our next installment of the 4-H's, and I'm with George, and it's been I've been looking forward to this one, George, because you're one of the first people that I really kind of got to know here, and so I probably know you maybe better than most people here, from my perspective. So it'll be fun for me to hear more of your story, and I've heard some of it already, so it'll be good. And we're in a unique place. We're in the furnace room, and I thought that this might be a good location. We're here at the church, but this is a part of the church that a lot of us don't see, but that you see quite a bit. And you've been a part of working a lot in this physical plant that is the church building. And so appreciate what you have done over the decades in this church, not just with the physical building, but just with the mission of the church, and both this church and within the community. Mm. So we're going to start with our first H, which is history, and fill us in a little bit on sort of what brought you here. And I know a little bit of the truth is that you were born here, but fill us in just a little bit of your history.
Well, it may take a long time, but
that's why I said a little bit.
So I was born here in the valley. My parents were immigrants. They came from Holland, and my dad came to the island thinking he would find some work, make some money, and go back to the Fraser Valley and start a dairy farm. But it was the first time in his life that he only had to work 8 hours, and he had a good paycheck, and he never left.
Yeah.
And raised 5 kids. I spent all my youth in the Christian Reformed Church. So from infant on, I have been through Sunday school, catechism, boys club, youth group, and then I quickly shifted into leadership type roles.
Yeah.
So by the time I was 15, I was helping another man run a boys club for a year. Then I was in youth group leadership, and then by the time I was 21 or 22, I was a Sunday school superintendent. Don't tell anybody.
No. Everybody hear that?
Because I thought I never wanted to be saddled with that again.
Yeah.
And during those years of growing up, I was just an average kid in school. Nothing went easy for me. My dad was a real do-it-yourselfer. And when I was 9 years old, for his centennial project in '67, he decided to build a house. Well, I followed my dad everywhere. And one of my keen memories is sitting on the ridge of the roof on a Saturday night, and we had nailed on the last shingles.
Wow.
And then I knew of what I wanted to do for the rest of my days. I wanted to be a carpenter. And by the time I was 13, I got real ambitious, and I built my first canoe.
Wow. And
that was made out of the leftovers out of the siding from the Christian Reformed Church.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And while I think of it, that building is 50 years old now. And when I was 13, I followed my dad to that job site every Saturday while they were building with a crew of guys, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 15, I tried to convince my dad that I wanted to leave school. I said, "Dad, I don't need to have a grade 12 education to be a carpenter." He says, "You're right, George," but he says, "You're going to finish your grade 12. So I left school. I had done extremely well in the trade type subjects, and went to the plywood plant where my father worked, and had a really good start financially by going there. So by the time I was 18, I bought land, and by the time I was 18 and a half, I was drawing a house plan in my parents' dining room. My dad walked behind me on a Sunday afternoon, and he looked, "What are you doing, George?" I said, "I'm drawing a house plan." He said, "Do you want a partner?" So my dad and I teamed up, and we started building a house. And then in the second year of the construction, we were doing this beside our daily work in the mill. He said, "George, I got to be home more." So I finished the house by myself. And then to speed things up a little bit, I was 22 and I felt rather isolated in the Christian Reformed Church in the sense that most young people left the valley to pursue education.
Right.
And there were a few of us left behind, and I wanted some fellowship. So I started to look around, and I even went to the Lower Mainland, to a couple of events, didn't really find anything, came back. And then a mutual friend of one of my siblings invited me over to a college and careers group that was meeting with the Baptist church. So I went there. Yeah, it was kind of nice. And then this gal who had taken me there said, I got to stop home and pick something up. And she says, why don't you come on in? What she had done was set me up to see her roommate.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I had listed the house that my dad and I had built together, and I went down to the real estate office one day, and things weren't going that well, and I just said to the realtor, you're done. And I went home, and my dad said, how'd you make out? I says, I just took the house off the market. Oh, he says, what do you have in mind? I says, I'm going to move in it. Well, he says, you better find yourself a wife.
Got a house, gotta have a wife.
Gotta have a wife. So I moved into it and met Trish, my wife. Matter of fact, it was the only girl I ever dated. 6 weeks later, I asked her to marry me. Came home, told my parents. My mother's immediate reaction is, you can't do that.
But I already asked her.
I did. And then what was interesting is we started to talk about faith, and particularly the topic of baptism came up. And then I started to think about it, and I also was thinking of our future and where we're going to go to church. And I wrestled with this for a long time. And I finally concluded what I understood, what I embrace now, was the correct understanding of baptism. So Trish and I moved here and joined the church. Less than a year being here, I was part of the management team.
Okay.
Okay. I have been involved with all sorts of stuff, but what's interesting for me is I have my grade 12. I was never a scholar. Didn't have any special type of stuff, but I have been put in places where I thought I was never capable of doing, and have done that largely out of obedience.
Yeah.
More than anything else. Now looking back, you can see the thread in my life of being equipped constantly. Very little was done in my own strength.
Yeah.
Looking back. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I have been everywhere from being in the pew to standing on the platform to repairing stuff here. But what is interesting for me is my life has been built around God.
Yeah.
It's not sort of setting my career first. Actually, when I stepped out to go in construction and be self-employed, it didn't take long, and I had a rude awakening. My health started to deteriorate very badly. It looked like something was up. And then I was off work for a bit, went to a doctor, and then the doctor said to me, you should get out of construction. And I was slammed, because that's all I knew, and that's all that I wanted to do. And it looked like that was going to be the end of it. I did a few other things for a while, but in all my life, I have never been far from wood. I've worked in sawmills, plywood factory, ran a workshop for the mentally handicapped, and that sort of stuff. That was with wood. Did house inspections. That was with wood. And I just made myself available to God, and as a result, I'm now 63. At 33, or very close to my 33rd birthday, I was told to get out. And I have been blessed with all kinds of rich experiences working with my hands.
Yeah.
Never made a lot of money, but I've had an incredibly good journey.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's sort of where I'm at.
Good. Thanks, George. Well, we're going to move out of this room because it's really hot in here.
Yeah.
Both these furnaces are firing. And we're going to go to a few other unique places in the church. And we'll continue with our next H, which is Heroes,
Okay.
at another location.
Sure.
All right, we're in our second unique spot. This is the custodial closet. Is that what
Yep.
you'd call it? Yeah, at the back of the church. I've actually been in here a couple of times. And George, let's step into the second H, Heroes. Who are the people who've had an impact in your life?
Some of the individuals that really had an impact, particularly my dad. He was a man of faith. He was a man of principles. And he was a doer.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I am capable or been able to do are because my dad modeled them. So for instance, simple things like chairing a meeting, running a big work bee, I experienced being under my dad.
Right.
And that sort of gave me the model. The people that really are heroes to me are the ones who were strong in the faith. One of my earliest memories was of an elder who came to the house to visit my folks. And I was about yay high. And old Mr. DeWall had hands the size of mitts. And he reached down and he just grabbed my hand and folded it into his.
Wow.
And he had some kind words to say to me. And that has stuck. In my school years, from an academic point of view, there were some teachers who just believed in me that I could do certain things, and that was a great help. And within the faith life, I can point to many an older man. Some of the experiences that are dear to me is like, for instance, around Christmas and New Year's Eve, to hear those Dutch people sing some of the old hymns with real passion. The faithfulness of some of those members of that church mean a lot to me. They were the faithful ones. They were a community made up of people from all over Holland, yet they had a common ground, and that was their faith.
Yeah.
And many of them had gone through tough journeys themselves, but they were always available, willing to teach you about God. And they talked about God, how it affected their own personal lives. And that has had a great impact on me. They had witnessed God's hand.
Yeah.
And now in latter years within this church, many of the men and women who have been a part of this church, their lives have modeled it, and it has been an encouragement to hear them and to walk alongside them. Many of them were not necessarily highly educated, some of them were, and I've had the benefit of that. I have had the unique experience of walking along Leyland Botsit for 13 years, and he was a good stimulus for me. Challenged me to read stuff that I normally wouldn't have read. We've experienced stuff together, some hard times. And there are other pastors that I've been under too that have been really good encouragers. Another one that's really close to me, and that's my wife. She's watched me go through a lot of leadership struggles, both within the church and outside the church. I have also had good encouragement when I was the chair of the Christian school here in Port Alberni, which was a real tough gig for me. I can think in particular of one teacher there, Mr. Cornthwaite, a man of incredible faith and humility that was displayed in him has really rung true with me. Yeah, it's people of the faith that have been really my heroes.
That's good, good. And that's the opportunity we get to become as well, people of faith, and to be heroes perhaps for other generations coming up. Good. Thanks, George. We'll move again, and we'll go on to the hurts. Okay, George, the hurts, some of the challenges, some of the pains in life, whatever you're willing, feel appropriate to share with us.
Okay. Being a part of an immigrant family is one thing. So there's the isolation of not having relatives. And then to have a mom who had struggles, which had great impact on the family. Went through all of that. I really don't want to talk too much about that. But what really has had impact on me is the struggles within church life over the years. Where the confusion of what we're called to do and how we behave is lost, and the turmoil that it can create. I struggle particularly with when I'm in town. Occasionally you'll see somebody who has come and gone, and there were better times and there were good times together. And when the very principle that I adopted a long time ago, and that's taught to all of us, and that is to bend to prayer and bend to Scripture or the Word of God. And it's when we drift from that is when all the struggles carry on. I've been in the midst of a lot of this stuff over the years. I have walked probably most of my adult life with a pretty heavy heart because of it. Because I fear for what it stands for. When we don't forgive each other, God doesn't want anything to do with us. We need to reconcile those things. That's tough. And then there have been a few other things that hurts. So I told you earlier that I had hoped to be a carpenter. So when I left high school, I finished as the top student in the industrial wing and was recognized by the school system. And then I was offered an apprenticeship by the school board and by McMullen Waddell, just prior for me going to trade school. So I went to trade school, and I finished in the top 3% in BC. Came back, school board reneged, and the company reneged. Okay? And then when I was 33, to have the carpet pulled out from under you, never having had a chance to get an apprenticeship, because the apprenticeships were only in industrial settings, basically at that time in this area, would have meant that I had to leave town. And one of the reasons I never left town was basically my dad, in the sense that mom wasn't well and the rest of my siblings had left. So I stayed basically to support them. Then I chose family life, and then you put family first. So that stuff gets put on the back burner. So over the years, the opportunities to be on certain projects was simply not going to happen because I didn't have my papers. And that has stung. To this day, I don't have my papers. I sometimes think maybe that I should go back, even though I'm 63, and get them. But that had purpose.
Yeah.
It had purpose, and I see it now. It kept me dependent on God.
Yeah.
It put me in circles that I would have never been. It also made me open to be available to other people. I don't know if you're aware of it, but this house that I just built was a project that was supposed to have happened 40 years ago. I was supposed to be building small houses in my mind. So that never happened. And when the opportunity finally presented itself, I said to my wife, I want to have time for people. And I have been blown away. I've been building on Gertrude Street for almost 3 years by the time the project was finished. And then the standing joke was, George is always talking to somebody,
Yeah.
which has had a tremendous impact on other people's lives. Just allowing them to talk. So, yeah, there are hurts, but they have purpose. It has made me who I am. It has kept me dependent on God.
Yeah. That's good. I can echo so much that in my own life too. It's like God doesn't waste a single experience. Even if I've blown something,
That's right.
He doesn't waste that experience, and
Yeah.
still works it for some incredible, sometimes some amazing good
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me. Yeah. Good. Well, thanks, George, for sharing. That's really good. Appreciate it. And we'll move over to our last station here for the hopes.
Okay.
All right, we've got our last one, the hopeful one, hope. And we're standing here in the baptismal, so what a place of hope to be standing. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so what are you hoping for?
Well, I'm hoping that people see the relationship between the cross and this.
Yeah, it's good.
I don't know if I've ever told you how painful that is to build a cross.
Yeah,
I've been a carpenter or a woodworker all my life, and that's not an assignment that I like
yeah,
because of what it implies. It's a tool to kill somebody.
yeah. It's an instrument of torture.
An instrument of torture. But once you know what went on there,
Yeah,
is the hope that I have today. So,
yeah. That's good, George. And what we got there is death and resurrection.
Exactly.
Right? Death and resurrection. Yeah.
and they're not far apart,
No.
and it's available to everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what most people miss. They think it's for somebody else, but it's for us.
Yeah.
And what I also hope is people stop fooling around, like postponing that decision
Yeah.
to take God seriously,
Yeah.
because it's going to be quickly taken away from you.
Yeah.
And I would like the people to understand the hope that I have, the peace that I have. I told you that I walk with a heavy heart, but it doesn't mean that I'm lost. No, I live with the peace of what God gives me and the ability to go through life. And I would like to see that in all people. I have that hope for my 4 kids. I have that for my relatives. I have it for the very people that are within this building and those on the street. My hope is also that when I work and people walk up to me on the sidewalk and asking about a house, that a conversation leads elsewhere.
Yeah.
And particularly to be freely able to talk about God and what He has.
Yeah.
What most people don't understand, we're living in eternity now.
Right.
It's not about after you're dead. It
Starts
begins now.
Yeah.
And you can't change the time clock. It's a reality. Either you're going to be with God or you're going to be separated. And that separation is horrific.
Yeah.
Just the idea that you will spend eternity. I can't get my head around how long a time that is.
No. Yeah.
But I also get an incredible peace knowing that things will be renewed. We will live in a setting where there is joy. There is a lot to live for. My hope is also for the church to grow again, not only in numbers but in depth. I hope that we can have an immediate impact in our neighborhoods. So I have personally pursued a project outside the church for the first time, trying to relieve the pain of not having housing for some people. That's what I can do in immediate. I also want to create hope in people now that they can have the benefit of a relationship with God. And to understand what that's like is sometimes hard to describe. You have to sometimes look back and see where God has helped you. I'm just going to tell one story.
Yeah.
15 years ago, I was asked to go pick up Pastor Leyland out of Wisconsin. So I flew across to Wisconsin just before Christmas to drive a moving truck back. In the wintertime, the worst possible time you can go. And we had to cross the Great Divide. And just the day before we crossed the Great Divide, we were planning to push through and go over the divide on my insistence rather than stay put because I knew there was a storm coming.
Yeah.
Well, we ended up plowing right into a snowstorm and having to pull off into a small motel. Didn't sleep much that night. Next morning I got up at around 5:30, couldn't sleep anymore. And I heard some rustling outside, and I got up and got clothes and walked outside, and Leyland was there. And there was at least 8-10 inches of snow laying on the ground and lots more snow falling. Now what are we going to do? So I said to Leyland, why don't we pray? He says, yeah. And I said to Leyland, I'm not a man who asks for a fleece or anything like that. But I says, this particular case, I says, I wouldn't mind some guidance. So we prayed. And we talked for a while. And what you should understand, we were in a bit of a bowl, and high above us by about 300 feet, and in the distance was the freeway that we had come off of. And now we had to rejoin that at some point.
Right.
And I could hear a heavy vehicle go by with chains on it coming by. And I looked up, it was a yellow school bus. And I looked at Leyland and I said, Leyland, if the school bus can go, we can go.
Yeah.
So we stepped in the trucks. And what you should understand, in my background, when I was in my 30s, I owned a 4-wheel drive school bus. And I hauled skiers in the winter. Up here on Mount Arrowsmith and Mount Washington. And I have driven in some incredibly rough conditions.
Yeah.
But this U-Haul truck had what they call straight line tires. So the grooves are, there's no jogs in there.
Yeah.
And there are no chains. And I'm pulling a 16-foot covered trailer yet with this thing. So it's a 26-foot truck with a 16-foot trailer behind it. And we're going up an 8% or better incline. And we're on hard, packed snow.
Man.
And the conditions weren't really good. And I had Eric Botts and his son with me in the other seat. And we're going up and up. And then I felt the wheels go skip, 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 grab. To this day, from everything I know about driving, that shouldn't happen.
No.
Well, to put it in perspective, I took Eric Botsit back in the winter the other way. And we went down this hill that I had come up.
Yeah.
And it was bare pavement. And I had to put this moving truck into a lower range to stop it from taking off on me. So it gives you an idea how steep it was.
Wow.
And then it still hit home. Where God has his hand in your life, that's just one of many.
Yeah.
Some will say, no, that's just a story. No, it's not just a story. I rarely talk about those types of things, but this is one of those. And I've had more of these things happen in my life. So there is a God who is in control. There is a God who can do a lot for you. you have more to gain by going towards Him
Yeah.
than going away from Him.
Sure.
And most people don't make the connection. They seem to think that you're going to get punished all the time, when in fact it's not.
Yeah.
God will put you through stuff so you grow closer to Him.
Yeah.
And that is my hope, is that you can grasp that idea that you're not giving up much.
Right.
You're gaining a whole lot.
Yeah.
But don't get this idea that it's going to be easy. You're going to have to give it all up
Yeah.
for the greatest gain.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks, George.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that. All right. Well, that concludes our 4-H, and thank you so much for doing this with us, George.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you all soon on our next edition.